Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. This is Politics Tonight, where we dig beyond the headlines. And tonight I've been discussing reflating the Nigerian economy and the inevitable steps with a professional banker, development economist and CEO of Africa Capital and Equity Funds Limited in the United States of America, Dr. Kazim Bello. All right, Dr. Bello, let's go on with the conversation. I mean, one key issue in the country now is petrol subsidy removal. This impact has divided opinion.
That's correct.
What's your position on this?
Well, petrol subsidy, like I alluded to earlier on, is inevitable. It's just simply the fact that we cannot subsidize inefficiency. We cannot continue to subsidize inefficiency. I think one thing that is a fact among the stakeholders in this country is that regime of subsidy is not right. We've got to fix it. Now, whether in the process of fixing it, you got to remove the payment you do on it, or you got to fix the problem, inherent problem with the subsidy, is a different thing. But, well, the government took the right decision by taking a look at whether it can afford to be able to pay for the subsidy. And of course, the government thought it's not possible for them to sustain it. Now, does it mean that the subsidy itself should bring down the economy or should impact negatively on the economy? No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. What I think the government needed to have done initially was probably, they could have started long before the last administration, was to start injecting the palliative in the system, to cushion the system in readiness for the eventual removal of the subsidy. Now, the pain and the excruciating pain that the citizens are facing now, since I came into Nigeria, I've taken some survey and research, is that people are actually feeling the pinch of this removal because it was very sudden. But I thought the government should have gradually introduced the palliative. For instance, we are talking about alternative energy like EV cars or CNG cars and all those etc. We could have actually invested in those infrastructure. I keep talking about it. We need to invest in infrastructure and institutional framework to develop the system. Those are things that are lacking. And if those things have been injected in the system gradually, you will notice that you wouldn't have felt the pinch of this removal. Let me give you an instance. When the global oil prices is hitting the roof, India, with its population, was faced with the energy cost. Even before Ukrainian war started, they actually been facing tremendous pressure on gasoline energy cost. One of the things they did was to introduce a gradual process. The Bajaj, which you call the tricycle here, and buses and commercial buses and trucks and other vehicles in India are run on CNGs. And there's a strategic plan introduced by the government of China or India in order to help that process. So now they've kind of overcome and accomplished, and a lot of the pressure on the gas and the energy cost is going down. So we have to bear the pain. I have to be honest with Nigerians. All right.
But talking about palliatives, the federal government has released 5 trucks of grains and 5 billion naira to each state, amounting to about 180 billion naira. What impact can these have on the people?
Obviously, it will surely do something. It's something out of nothing. Yeah, I mean, but the truth about it is that we are talking about a 220 million economy. How long can the 5 billion goes in a state like Lagos State, in a state like Kano State? Even let's consider the smallest state like Osun or Abia, where the population is low. Those are what the federal government can afford at the moment. But it doesn't mean it's going to stop there. I'm sure the government is looking at other options and alternatives to inject money into the economy. We have to reflate the system somehow. In one of the session I did before I traveled, and they asked me something similar in this perspective. And the question, my reaction to it is that the federal government is going to generally amass some extra revenue from removal of oil subsidy and also the deregulation of the FX market. What that means is that if the federal government was expected to rake in a revenue at $460 naira per dollar in revenue, now the government can rake in about 770 per each dollar. That gives the government about 300 naira extra money. Now, my advocation was that we have had fiscal indiscipline in this country. That money, yes, the government needs it. The federal government needs that money right now. But I was looking at the way the government can halve that money. I'm talking about the extra income from the FX and the removal of subsidy. Use that to reflate the economy. And I'm seeing the tracks of what the government is doing, but it may not be sufficient enough to reflate the economy. We needed to reflate this economy so much that you allow those money to go into the hands of the disposable income earner. What that means is that you figure out how to get money into the hands of the people. When they spend, for every naira they spend, you are generating productivities. You are also improving productivity in the industries. When we had a recession in those days, about 8-10 years ago, during the regime of President George Bush, they spent 1 month preaching to us in the US that we are going to get some stimulus pay. But please do not put that money in your bank. Go to the store, keep spending, spend that money. Go, just buy, keep buying. That is the kind of thing we need to do in Nigeria. We need to figure out how to use some of that money to put money in the hands of the people to increase their disposable income in order for them to buy. Right now, people are not really buying. They only buy what they need.
So, Dr. Bello, now that you've gone there, and that's the issue of volatility in the foreign exchange markets in Nigeria, why has it become so volatile?
It has become volatile because of the obvious reason that we are seeing that it's manifesting. Number one is, I'll go back to what I said before. We are being made to believe that the country has a foreign reserve of $34 billion. And all of a sudden, we suddenly wake up and find out it's less than 20 billion. That short gap is a lot of cost to the country. It puts a lot of pressure in the market. And I often said two things. The major problem with that market is essentially human factor and the market itself. Human factor is that there's a whole lot of things that is going on in the market that is not supposed to go on. And government is trying to fix that. We need to fix that human factor in the market, meaning that some unseen hand interfering with the market. And we cannot have a stable foreign currency system when on our own we are manipulating the market itself. I mean, to me, that has to be fixed in the first place. Then we go to the market itself. I've also said something. Nigeria is one of the only few countries around the world that has not signed up into what you call export revenue internalization process. What that means is that we sell crude oil to China, we sell crude oil to India, and the money that those people paid for those exports are domiciled in a foreign country. Nothing is wrong with that. Essentially, if you have a strong financial management structure that works well. But at the same token, if you are a country that is developing, like Nigeria, we should follow the kind of example that Singapore did. Singapore started from nowhere to become a giant exporting country. They didn't do it overnight. What they did was to imbibe the same concept that I just mentioned. They internalized the export process. And what does that lead them? It led to Singapore becoming one of the major financial hubs in the Southern Asia. and ultimately became one of the Asian tiger. So we should focus on that. There's nothing wrong if I'm selling Nigerian crude oil from the Niger Delta to a Chinese company. There's nothing wrong for that Chinese company to domicile that dollar in a Nigerian bank. What that does for you as a country is that it increases the inflow of this same foreign exchange that say we scarce. It is just like the naira. When you deposit that money in the typical Nigerian system, it is held in what you call a international financial portfolio. But it's managed in Nigeria. And essentially, what that does is that it increases the inflow of dollar. And then me and you can access it. Government can access it. Industrial can access it. Foreign companies can access it. And it will bring multiplier effect into the supply of the currency that we are talking about. And believe me, if Nigeria can do that, we will not have any scarcity with foreign exchange again. That is what Dubai, UAE did. That is what Qatar did. That is what KSA is doing. And Kuwait has actually started that a long time ago. And these are other OPEC members. So what is stopping Nigeria from doing the same thing?
All right, let's dig further. The NNPCL recently secured a $3 billion loan to stabilize exchange rates in the country. How will this help?
Well, the government actually needed to bridge some gap in terms of cash flow. And obviously, the statement from the presidency clearly indicated what the money is meant for. I believe that some part of it is meant for to offset some payments outstanding for NNPC. And then the other part of it is meant to reflate the system in terms of injecting funding into the foreign exchange market. Again, this is the same thing I just mentioned. If we have a system, an internalization process, and synchronization process for our export earning proceed, we will not have a need to go outside to go and raise such a capital, because that money will be existing in Nigeria. And the government can easily borrow that money or tap into it in terms of raising it through treasury bills or treasury certificate or whatever you want to do with it. So for the fact that you take the money, take it to London, take it to Hong Kong, or deposit it in Germany, it is not helping the Nigerian economy. It is helping the economy of those countries. And those countries can take that money, borrow it. When NNPC needs it, they give you your money. But we needed to step back a little bit and look at what others are doing. When you go to countries that I mentioned, the other OPEC countries, you are amazed of the kind of development that is going on in their landscape. Those money is not from anybody. It is money that comes in from inflow of revenue. They are able to tap it, borrow it, and put it back in the system. And that way they can reflect the system, generate steady inflow, and of course it will generate opportunity for the economy to grow.
So all of these factors you mentioned earlier, do they contribute to the fall of the naira?
Well, the essential
or are there other factors?
Of course, like I said, there are several factors that led
I'm asking this question because when the new administration unified the forex windows, I mean, many thought depreciation of the naira will stop.
Well, I personally didn't have that projection that the depreciation will fall. Any currency has tendency to appreciate and depreciate. It's a common thing everywhere. It's not new to Nigeria. The only difference that we have in Nigeria is the steepness of the fall in the naira over time is what is worrisome to many people. The fact that the government deregulated the market does not necessarily mean that we will not see a direct devaluation of the naira. But what has happened in recent times, and of course, probably you want to say it's coming close home to the market situation, is that there's acute shortage of the currency that we are talking about in the system. And when you have that, and you allow the forces of demand and supply to determine your rate, you are not going to be left with many options than to allow the money to float as much as it can, depending on what you want to bring in. The $3 billion that the federal government got from Afroism, like I said, part of it we understand was going to be used to reflate the forex market in order to increase the liquidity in that market and try to see if we can stabilize it. But that is to me, is temporary measure. What will sustain a long-term measure for that market is government to step up revenue generation, either from oil or from other non-oil export, and one way or the other, and then let the market generate inflow, and also create the kind of confidence that the foreign investors will have in order to deposit, to invest in the Nigerian foreign market, exchange market. So, it's not two ways. We have to figure out how to improve liquidity in that market. And one of those things is what I said earlier on. We got to learn from other countries by internalizing the export and impulses for Nigeria.
So recently the CBN released a statement vowing to crack down on currency speculators. How do you advise the Apex Bank to go about this?
Well, one of the concerns that you may want to portend when it comes to allowing a market to be generated by forces of demand and supply is the possibility of speculator infiltrating into the market. Again, these are things that happen worldwide. It's not peculiar to Nigeria. But one of the things the federal government, this federal central bank can do, of course, was make sure that the internal mechanism in monitoring, not control. Controlling is a different ballgame. Whether you like it or not, the CBN has to still monitor the market. That is their statutory assignment and function as an apex bank. So in doing that, the central bank have to make sure that the data and gathering and generation system is stepped up. I don't know how much of that is going on right now, but for a central bank to say, we are going to clamp down on somebody and this and that, yes, it is okay. But the most important thing is that why not build a system that will give you a real-time data generation that will allow you to see what is going on in the market, and then you don't probably have to do nothing to clamp down on those people before they get themselves out of the market. So, but in a situation where you don't have data to support what you are doing, you allow the speculator to grow, and you have to chase them, like central bank has said. But the truth of the matter is, how do you police a massive economy like Nigeria when people can do all kinds of things behind a kiosk or somewhere in an obscure way without the central bank knowing what is going on? So I'm advocating that central bank should focus more on, again, investing on infrastructure that will allow them to generate more data on real-time basis, and then also focus on capacity to discourage the black market, whichever way you want to do it. That was the essential primary goal of the deregulation. But 2 months into that deregulation, or less than 2 months, we've seen that it has not worked because we are back to square one. We still have two markets.
So talking about not working, this is not the first time Nigeria will be liberalizing the foreign exchange market. First was in 1986, we tried again in 1995, 1999, and 2016. But all of these times, this policy has been marred by various impediments. We've spoken about one, that's volatility. Many have said another is transparency. What do you think the government needs to do to ensure that the central bank goes through with this policy?
Well, I said something earlier on, that there are two major problems out of so many that plague the market. One of that is human factor. Yes, I like the historical perspective that you put into it. I know about all those changes, and we know about what was introduced over the years since 1986. But when you look at what has happened over the years historically, you will find out that a lot of the problem also has to do with human factors. We have to devise a way to eliminate or reduce to the barest minimum this human factor. I don't want to go into details about human factor, but we know what we are talking about here. Then we can now deal with the market itself. Then dealing with the market, one of the things what I've just said is this is an export earning country. There's no reason why we should be under pressure as an export earning country with our foreign exchange. I did an empirical analysis recently, and out of about 15 export countries in the whole world, only 2 are under pressure with their foreign exchange market, and Nigeria is one of them. There's no reason why we should have that. And right now, maybe due to COVID and some recession, the export earning capacity and the fact that NNPC has not been bringing in so much as expected has been going down. But this is an economy that potentially can earn over $300 billion in a year in export. So if we have that potentialities, then there's no reason why we should be talking about acute shortage of foreign exchange as an export-earning country, so to say. All
right, so this code of conduct for BDCs that have just been designed by the CBN to stabilize exchange rate, what can this achieve?
Well, this is just an administrative process by central bank. I don't think this as a statutory function. You cannot deny the central bank of doing. They like I mentioned to you before. In the past, before the deregulation, the central bank manages, control, and monitor the market. But now with the deregulation, the function of controlling the market may have been stepped down a little bit. But that function of monitoring the market, it's still big for the central bank. So if they see the BDC as an impediment or one way or trickle their operation somehow, why not? I think that policy you are referring to was essentially one taken by central bank not funding the BDC in the first place. And then I don't think that's the problem. That's not the problem, because you don't even have to fund the BDC. The BDC, if you reflate the system, allow the system to have its functionality as it's supposed to be, the DBC, we don't have to go and line up at the CBN to collect foreign exchange before they
Dr. Bello, before I let you go, I mean, most of our approaches to economic stability have been short-term. What long-term strategies will you advise the government?
Well, the long time, yes, you are right. Some of our approaches might look short-term, but not necessarily short-term, because like you mentioned, I believe we have a national planning minister in place. That falls under the armpit of his portfolio. And Nigeria has development plans. The question is whether we actually tickle that plan in order to generate the kind of growth and development that we want. Is a different ball entirely. So one of the things that I would think Nigeria needs to do in order to focus on that is to go back to basics. And that basis is that we have to begin to create a national economic plan on a sustainable long-term process that works. And the way that works is that you have to, it's a lot of work. The National Development Plan thing, it's a function that goes on every day, 365 days in a year. It's not as if you do it now and then you wait until the next budget. No, it's a function that must be constantly tampered with, reflected, and tinkled around in order for you to have a system. Because there's nothing that says you plan A now and next year that A is still obtainable. Something may have changed with the economic system globally that makes you to change that system. So we have the answer to that is we go back to the basic. We focus on the National Development Plan.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kazim Bello, professional banker, development economist, and CEO of Africa Capital and Equity Funds Limited in the United States of America, as we discussed the inevitable steps to reflating the Nigerian economy. Thank you so much for your perspective on the show.
Thank you, Jumoke, for having me.
Thank you, sir. And thank you so much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on Twitter at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. You're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatuji.